Well, thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITWire.com video. I'm at the Built to Change Summit from CA Technologies in Santa Clara. On my left, I have Rahim Bhatia. He is the the GM of Developer Products. And on my right, I have Scott Morrison, a VP and Distinguished Engineer at CA Technologies. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
So I thought thank you. I thought I'd start off by just asking you to both introduce yourselves and tell the viewers what it is that you do in your respective roles.
Sure. So my name is actually Rahim Bhatia. I know it's a little bit of a challenge.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's
Rahim.
okay. People have used different names.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's Rahim Bhatia. I'm the general manager, so I have the pleasure of leading a team around our product management strategy and development all around our API management solution that we have here at CA.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with CA for about 4 years. And Scott?
Yeah, and I'm Scott Morrison. I'm a distinguished engineer in the office of the CTO. So I'm actually looking at the big picture of technology and the undercurrents of where things are going so that CA can make sure that we're on whatever wave is coming in. Now, I actually came into CA through the acquisition of Layer 7.
Mm-hmm.
I was the CTO of Layer 7. We began it in Vancouver about 16 years ago, which is hard to believe. I mean, it takes a long, long time to build a great business. But fortunately, we were lucky. We had the right people. We were in the right place at the right time, and we were fortunate to have actually been acquired about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so now, of course, Rahim is leading that group and taking it to bigger and greater things.
Now, Rahim, you were giving a talk today on building better apps faster with automation. So we've got that presentation recorded, but what are the key takeaways for people who are just watching this video?
Sure. So my talk was all centered around the various different uses of APIs. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to focus on the traditional enterprises, right? I think we see a lot of examples about current technology or newer technology that's used by digital upstarts. But I think the focus is also on how traditional enterprises who've been around for 100 years, mm-hmm. decades, how they're adding digital as core competencies to what they do. They've got great brands, great employees. They've been around for such a long time, and you're not around for that long without learning how to evolve. And so for them, digital is like the next evolutionary step for them. The secret is how do you bring together and bring the true nature of your brand and your capabilities and add digital to it. And we believe that the foundational elements around using APIs in a very, very robust way, using that full lifecycle capability that you have. APIs are more about sort of that face of the world going forward. Mm-hmm. And so, having an ability to make sure you have that robustness built in to that full API lifecycle is critically important. And like I said, I think our focus again is on these traditional enterprises and enabling them to be really, really great into the next journey as they move forward.
I was just thinking of that saying about how Netflix was trying to become HBO faster than HBO was trying to become Netflix, and that's an example of the digital upstarts. And maybe HBO is not a 100-year-old business, but they had to, they've succeeded now with HBO Go.
I mean, look, you see examples of GM, a car company, right?
Yeah, much more traditional.
Much more traditional.
100-year-old
and you just saw a major investment of over $2 billion in that entity, right? In terms of how are they going to inject a new investment to digitally transform. So
just tell us briefly about that, because in Australia, General Motors is left with there's no more manufacturing of cars in Australia, which is a great shame.
Yeah.
And you still have it here. So what's the short version of that for the international viewers?
So SoftBank, I just read in the news a week ago, right? They invested $2.6 billion.
Yeah, I missed that.
Into GM. Also,
SoftBank invest in everything. They're quite an incredible company.
They do, and SoftBank is an APJ connection
absolutely.
As well, right?
Exactly.
So certainly, look, and you're seeing digital transformation appear across all industries. Specifically for the APJ audience, I am actually incredibly fascinated by how Singapore is transforming their city using digital transformation, making the citizen the center of what they do, all based on API platforms. Singapore is also the center, the ASEAN region specifically, overall, is certainly a center of a hotbed of activity around digital banking and open banking, making a mold for a lot of other financial institutions into sort of how they need to kind of move forward in this new world as well. So I think there's a lot of activity happening in the APJ region specifically that is just phenomenal in terms of, I think it's a good test case for other organizations around the world.
Sure. You don't have to speak specifically to APJ, but what are your comments, Scott, on everything that we've just spoken about?
Well, Rahim really nailed it. I think the transformation that we're seeing now is really fundamental to, I think, how organizations are viewing themselves and how they're using IT as a resource. In the past, we always kind of looked at technology and IT as something that had to go up separately to solve a business problem within a large enterprise. There's a big shift going on now, though, and that's really where IT itself is becoming the conduit for really that connection to the customer. And so literally that relationship is being fostered between an organization, its business, and the customers through the whole digital department. And that's very different. Like that's not something that's necessarily going through traditional sales, traditional marketing. It's actually a much tighter relationship in that. And so the great companies of the world in the internet these days are the ones that really embrace that. They're the ones that recognize that all this technology is really a new way to sort of foster a deeper relationship with your customers. That's what you see with Uber. That's what you see with Netflix. All of these great Silicon Valley companies that are quite literally changing our lives all the time. They've completely embraced this. They understand it. And so it's something that we're seeing at CA that's beginning to start to take hold in more traditional enterprises and that. But there you've got the momentum of the way things were done in the past. And so fortunately, technology can come around and start to deal with exactly that entrenched idea and begin to make a little bit of a change.
Yeah. That's actually an interesting comment about traditional enterprise vendors. I mean, one of the other key points is that these traditional enterprises have spent years, decades building up their enterprise applications that they have. And it's very difficult for them to move off of those applications.
Well, they spend a lot of money, and to be told it's all out of date, it's like, no, we just finished polishing it.
Their core business processes are embedded,
Yeah.
or run by those applications. And so, they need to make sure that they're able to manage their transition in this change. And certainly the technology that we have across CA is very, very key foundational. And you think about the people management aspect of it. We've got great solutions around agile management and how to manage the manage the people and the processes part of it. Second is really making sure that you have the foundational right architecture. That's where we kind of come in, and then obviously building in the automation capabilities that we have to make them go faster. So if you think about CA overall, we actually are able to do that across that entire set of areas in terms of people, process, and technology, and make sure that these enterprise customers are able to be beneficiaries of all of that.
Digital transformation really is all about continuous improvement. I mean, we've gone through many waves of digital transformation.
Yeah.
When we first went from typewriters to Wang, word processors, that was digital transformation.
Right.
That was like in the 70s. Here we are in 2018, nearly in the 2020s, and all those science fiction dreams of smart AIs and all the things I read about in Asimov's books, it's all slowly finally coming true. One of the other speakers today spoke about how 30 years ago he was told voice recognition will be here in 10 years. And 30 years later, here it is.
Yeah.
Finally.
I think the other thing about digital transformation and traditional enterprises, I'll go back to the point I made. I mean, these are storied companies, right? And so they have value that's beyond what I think even potentially they know themselves. And so I think the secret, again, is to figure out what your value is to your customers and how digital can become that extension of your brand, of yourself, and in terms of how you engage with the end consumers. I think it's important to spend the time up front in really recognizing that. And in a lot of cases, transformations of all nature, including digital transformation, force you to have a reckoning of what business are you in. And really, really focus on those core competencies that you're really good at, and then you can try and figure out, how do I extend that digitally? How do I make sure that I'm participating in an ecosystem? And so any kind of a transformation in digital is no different. It has a moment where you have to kind of say, what business am I in? And kind of forces you to kind of go to some of those basic principles about your business.
Yeah. Any other comments on that, Scott?
Well, I think, as we mentioned earlier, this is this amazing time of change. But change doesn't mean you throw everything away. And nobody wants to get rid of their mainframe, for instance.
No, yeah.
It's still too fundamentally important. And so I think if you look at what CA is doing as a company, we recognize that all companies want to be able to both embrace what they've had in the past, but also really start to adopt new ideas and that. And that's why we have such a big emphasis on things like APIs, security, automation, the whole DevOps chain, and I would say the infusion of agility all throughout the organization. These are fundamental ideas in CA because we don't see them necessarily as a replace for what you've got. We see them as a way of refining what you've already done and then being able to refocus on that different emerging relationship with a customer. It's so powerful today.
And obviously, companies don't have to do this alone. I mean, CA stands ready to help companies with this, with decades of your own experience in transforming yourselves.
Absolutely. And every customer has like the whole problem. They've got lots of different vendors and everything like that. And we'll never go to you and say, well, you have to have all this.
Scrub it all.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
All from CA. Yeah.
And really that gets to the whole idea behind automation and APIs and DevOps and that, which is what you're doing is you're using the best of breed. You're pulling all of this together and integrating it in a way that makes sense for you. And what makes sense for you may not be what makes sense for the next company.
Absolutely.
You have to find your own way in this, and we'll help you find that.
And no doubt, because you do work with so many companies globally, you're able to share some of the learnings.
That's right.
And you must help companies achieve things a lot faster than would have been the case just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You see, common threads throughout all of this. It doesn't matter whether it's government, whether it's, private industry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's manufacturing. There's certain common things that come out all the time. And a company like CA, because of its global reach and because of the breadth of customer verticals that it actually covers, we can actually bring to you, that perspective of what's been done in other places, what's worked, and probably more importantly, what hasn't worked.
I remember in the year 2000 hearing about software as a service for the first time. And here we are in 2018. And, I mean, some companies must internally be shocked that they've been making all these changes. And they probably started some sort of transformation 5 or 10 years ago. And it's kind of now at a date, then they have to move up and get with the program. And, companies, some haven't really begun this journey yet, which is why we're having, you're having this event and you have CA World where your customers come. But it really is, things never stop changing, right? That's the only constant in the universe, and I guess that's why humans are built to change, even if we don't like to change.
Yeah.
We've got no choice in the matter.
It is interesting though, the one comment you made, right, which is around sort of technology and the knowledge around it. I would garner that, 4 years ago when I first started, you'd have to explain to a business person what an API was. We don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
They already intimately understand that. So I think what we're finding here is that over time, over the last few years, business has, number one, recognized the importance of technology to extending their business, and it's forced them to learn about technology.
Yeah.
And so now the line of business is much more conversant, dangerously so sometimes, but much more conversant in the realms of technology. So technology is no longer sort of the domain of sort of a technocrat or a select few.
It has to be company-wide.
Exactly.
Like
So
security.
Exactly. So there's a lot of business people who, like I said, first thing that they do is, before they didn't see the value in technology, so they never really bothered about it. I'll go worried about the product I'm building and everything else. Now they're saying, oh, technology allows me to have a greater reach, allows me to engage with my customers. I better learn about this. So they've learned enough that they're actually able to engage with IT in a much more collaborative way, as opposed to saying, I want this done, give it to me in 3 weeks type of discussion.
One of my favorites, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, that's one of the things that we really noticed in the early days of the API movement, is the people in an organization that brought in APIs, they weren't IT, it was marketing. Typically, it would be a marketing department that was really forward-looking and recognized that they actually needed to be able to get to the customer as quickly as possible. They recognized that things were changing on front ends all the time. Like the phone in your hand, is delivering you an amazing experience. But you've also got some, I think, pretty high expectations of that experience. And so marketing departments tend to be on the edge of that wave. They're the ones who are pushing that. And so what would happen is, technology like API technology would be brought in as sort of an early test case in a marketing department. And then once it had proven itself, then IT would kind of catch up and come in and say, okay, that was great that you did this POC, it's been very successful, we better take control of it. Now what we're seeing is, rather than having a marketing department, go forward like that, is IT departments are embracing this technology, and once again, they're being the innovators, bringing this in. So they're kind of reclaiming control. They're bringing in governance again, and I think a certain amount of formalization, which is necessary in any large organization.
Well, but it's permeated across the industry, where it doesn't really matter who's bringing it in. It used to be like with Palm Pilots, people brought it in, they wanted them to be working in the enterprise, or iPhones. One of my favorite sayings is from William Gibson, the the famous sci-fi writer, and he said the future. I mean, I've misquoted him for years by saying the future has already been invented. It just hasn't been widely distributed yet. But he said, as I was writing about it this morning because of the Apple event yesterday, the future is already here. It just hasn't been evenly distributed yet, and that's the case with smartphones. They're now commonplace. APIs, you said. Companies, business people now know what these are. I mean, 4 years ago they had no idea, you know. That's right. And so the future gets widely distributed, and we take it for granted. Now, speaking of the future and noticing the past, I know we've got to go, but 3 questions, right? Just briefly tell me what do you think 2028 is going to look like in terms of where we are today, and some of the challenges will be that we might be facing then, even though it's probably a tough ask in 30 seconds.
Do you want to start?
Sure. You know what?
You're the distinguished engineer, so,
you could do a lot worse than go back and watch Minority Report again and take a look at what was in there. Because one of the big things there was this idea that information was highly targeted and ubiquitous all the time. And so it didn't matter where we were, information would be fed to us. And so the big question is, how do those systems know who we are? How do they keep it narrowcast? How do they get the information that is only right for a public forum as opposed to a non-public forum? I think these are the great challenges over the next little while.
And when are we going to get color e-paper so my cereal box can give me ads?
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, that one's coming soon too.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to see in 2028 is ubiquitous information all the time.
Yeah.
Augmented reality is exploding. Just last week there was a huge conference here in Silicon Valley looking at exactly this, the interplay between augmented reality, virtual reality, and a number of other realities that we've barely even heard about. But the whole idea is that connectedness is going to take off in such a way that even now, where we think we've already got a problem with too much screen time and too much staring down like this, now it's going to be very different, because now it's going to be projected information in front of us coming from eyeglasses and things like that.
If you don't have augmented reality, you won't be able to survive in the real world, in inverted commas.
In the same way,
it'll be very different.
Yeah, in the same way you can't really survive without a phone these days.
Now, again, we're really running short on time, but what's the best piece of advice each of you has received in life to help you get where you are today?
Wow.
I got that from Ashton Kutcher. He thought it was a really good question to ask, because he was sick of being asked silly questions, and I thought that's a good question too.
I think embrace change all the time, because when I look back to when I did my degree in computer science many years ago, most of the languages, paradigms, and things like that, they're all gone. I've had to eject them out of my brain to make room for other things. I wish I actually could do that, but truth is, there's some fundamental ideas that carry through, but you can't get caught up in the details, and you can't get attached to any one thing. You've got to be ready to pivot all the time. And that's the fundamental message of Built to Change. I mean, it's something that I think, great innovators, great technologists do naturally. It's not necessarily something that organizations do naturally. But I think as people, we have to look at that, because it's always going to be changing, and we always have to be ready for those changes.
Rahim?
Sure. So I have 2. One related change is a really great Chinese proverb that I always relate to, which is when the winds of change blow, people do one of 2 things: they build walls or windmills. And so you want to build a windmill to harness the winds of change. The second thing I would say is that listen to your customers. It's a pretty simple advice. Sometimes it's very difficult to, you're mired in sort of the daily stuff that's going on around you. And the moment of clarity really comes when you're actively engaging and listening to your customers. It's probably the biggest thing that I would say.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, we have run out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Super.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.